up, nerds and nerdettes, ladies and gentlemen, boys and girls, dogs with voting rights, fungi with attitude, Skynet, and lemons with smiley faces drawn on them. All are welcome to The Pull, a show where we celebrate everything great about comic books and point and laugh at everything that is, oh, so freaking dumb about them. A lot of really interesting stuff going on this week in comics. We have our post-convergence DC, our still in the meat of Secret Wars Marvel, and Image kind of gets back on the train of releasing new #1s. So let's comic book, guys. First on the book list this week is Covenant. Covenant is the latest book from Rob Liefeld. Now, Rob Liefeld is famous for being one of the rock star artists that helped found Image. He's also famous for not knowing what the human body looks like. Now, while a lot of comic books from the 80s have aged like whiskey in a fine oak barrel, a lot of the 90s stuff has aged like tobacco spit in a boot. And Rob Liefeld was very much part of that generation. That's why a lot of those guys aren't doing a lot of creative work anymore. And Covenant is very much a book that is weighed down by a lot of antiquated 90s comic book things. No character or event in this story is introduced without a little Facebook status popping up and letting you know what you're supposed to know about this character. And on the surface, it seems like an incredibly efficient way to tell a story, especially in comic books when you only have 22 pages and there's a number of panels and then it's over. And you have to communicate a lot of information to your reader. In reality, it's actually a super inefficient way, but more importantly, it's incredibly unimmersive. The best way to communicate character and story to a reader is to let them experience it themselves. Simply tell the story and give the reader enough credit to be smart enough to absorb it and contextualize it themselves. What we have in Covenant feels more like a Wikipedia article about a story than an actual story. And that's not to say that Covenant is a complete waste of paper. There's some really interesting ideas that are hinted at and then immediately kicked off a cliff into thorny brambles. There was a point in the story where I thought this was going to be some sort of like biblical Avengers story where like Samson and Moses and all these guys team together to fight, I don't know, the ghost of Hitler or something. What we're left with is this sort of drawn out and overdone Crusades era tale where all the characters talk like the most fey guy at the Renaissance fair, and it's all so incredibly wooden and brief. No matter how interesting little tiny corners of this book are, it is weighed down at every turn by hackneyed execution and half-baked thoughts. Captain Canuck. So Captain Canuck was originally a series published back in 1975 by a company called Comely Comic Books. It might be pronounced Comely, but I think Comely is a much funnier word, so I'm going to say it's Comely Comics. It's about a Canadian Captain America going out and protecting the far distant future of 1993 from the forces of evil and villains set on stealing maple syrup and breaking hockey sticks. And they've decided to rejuvenate this series. Now that idea is awesome. Take an obscure, kitschy thing that seemed cool back in 1975 and update it and tweak it and make it fun for us new age space robot children. But no matter how cool a concept is, you still need to kind of follow through on it in a competent way. And Captain Canuck, it doesn't do that. The biggest mistake that Captain Canuck seems to make is that it trusts that its readers have some familiarity with this obscure mythos, and there's a big problem with that, because that mythos was from an obscure comic book in a limited run from 1975. I'm gonna drop some math science on you. Number of people who read Captain Canuck back in 1975, minus people who grew out of comic books, minus people who've died, minus people who still read comic books but don't really want to revisit that, minus people who don't know this book exists, equals exactly 0 fucking people. You can't rely on a mythos that no longer exists in the greater cultural mind. So Captain Canuck is constantly confusing and making references to things that make absolutely no sense. That could all be fine if what was going on in the individual panels was super interesting and fun. And honestly, at times it kind of is. There are genuine moments where you kind of chuckle to yourself at the silliness of this guy dressed like a Canadian flag, knife-handing a tar zombie in the neck and knocking him into some fire, but those moments are very few and far between because Captain Canuck is very committed to this mythos and story that it is building. The only problem is words! Look at all the words here, words there, there's words all on this side of the page, they even put words in this corner. There's words in this guy's glass and that gun. Probably Fire's words. You are constantly bombarded with narration and world building in every single page. No action or panel or picture is allowed to exist by itself. It has to be accompanied by dumps of information. And all this information doesn't make the story any clearer. It makes it more confusing. This still could have worked, even with all these words and confusing mythos and the fact that in this panel he looks like he has Graves' disease. This all could have worked if the book had any sort of sense of playfulness at all, but for the most part, it actually plays it really straight, and it is so dumb. It is such a dumb book, and if it had just hugged onto that idea and let itself be a dumb, fun, pulpy book, this could have been really cool. But no, they're really committed to telling a really confusing, really serious story, and it doesn't work. So Image is really, really good at giving me my Twilight Zone style science fiction where big ideas are kind of pulled apart in these really complex and mature stories. It is also really good at sliding on its mercury lined boxing glove and just pow, punching me right in the heart. And the newest book that does that is Airboy. Before I buy a comic book, I always read the little description that comes with it on Comixology, and I read Airboy and I'm like, this is really dumb, but I'm gonna read it because I have a problem and I'm not responsible with my money. Airboy is written by James Robinson and drawn by Greg Hinkle. James Robinson and Greg Hinkle are both characters in Airboy. And the plot is this creative comic book team is asked by Image Comic Books to reboot a long dormant comic book series named Airboy, and that's pretty much the whole plot. Now that sounds very strange and meta and probably a bit narcissistic, at least that was the assumption that I took right away, but the way this book sells itself is in its brutal honesty. James Robinson pulls no punches in the portrayal of himself as a broken and tired man. He hates himself. He struggles with the idea that he is a creative person in a creative industry that just might not be that creative. And while he has these moments of epiphany where he connects with his muse, he finds the whole process itself frustrating and hard to catch in a jar. The entirety of the story is really Robinson's struggle to understand himself and to understand where his creativity and where his sense of purpose comes from. And that's something that can be easily birthed on each individual's lives, but the way we see it here is in such brutal and naked honesty. Now, of course, near the end of the book, it does get more comic booky, and it starts to open up, and you kind of understand where this book is going as far as his relationship with his muse. But the ride, the journey, is such a completely personal invasion of Robinson's own personal space that you just can't help but feel honored to be in it. And it is constantly touching and shocking and really funny. There's definitely something that you wouldn't necessarily expect to see the giant white eye on, but you know what? It feels so at home in creativity and spirit, and its ability just to reach in and tickle your soul right under its ballsack. Alright, there we go. It's time for everyone's favorite part of the show. Actually, I hope it's not your favorite part of the show because it's the one that I actually put the least creative juices into, but anyways, pull these. Autumnlands Tooth and Claw number 6. Autumnlands Tooth and Claw has been a very, very strange but very interesting little bit of fantasy book. If you like heavy, dense, very serious fantasy, then this is the book for you. If you expect any sort of humor or lightheartedness, or if you have any problem accepting people with cat heads, then you can go ahead and skip it. But otherwise, you're in for a really good little piece of comic book right there. Big Man Plans is the current limited series from Eric Powell, who is one of the dudes that just gets every little element about comic books. This is one of the best put together comic books you will find out there from one of the best creators. It's only going to be 4 issues long, so go ahead and pick it up so you don't miss it. Arcadia number 2. Just call me Nostradamus because I can predict the future. I criticize Arcadia number 1 for just being too brief, introducing too many ideas, and I thought that as the series progressed, it would get a lot more well-paced and a lot more interesting. And already issue 2, it does that. It slows down and gives us a lot more thought-out versions of its ideas. Broken World number 1, another interesting number 1 from Image. It's got some flaws, but it's going to be a cool series. Keep an eye on it. No Mercy, just keep reading New Mercy. It's early, it's good, just stay on it. Years of Future Past, an entirely skippable Secret Wars series. Next one. Secret Wars Battleworld, another entry of one of the mini anthology Secret Wars series. That is actually good. Check this one out. A lot of really, really cool bastardizations of the Marvel Universe. Future Imperfect. Santa Claus Hulk is really angry and he wants to kill everyone, so he does. Mini male man crushes is Joshua Williamson, who writes Nailbiter, so make sure that you read Nailbiter so you and I can crush on them together. The Darth Vader series continues to do a lot for the depth of that character, and it's very, very interesting, and it kind of opens up a lot of the motivations of what makes Darth Vader, so make sure you read it. Groot #1 is like Calvin and Hobbes. Instead of a tiny person and a stuffed tiger, it has a giant tree monster and a raccoon with a machine gun. So yeah. Amazing Spider-Man Renew Your Vows is one of the most interesting takes on the Spider-Man universe I've seen in a long time. Definitely check this one out. Star Wars #6 did something that I didn't think this series was going to do, and it makes actual, real changes to the Star Wars mythos. And while it's not super impactful, it is very interesting, so make sure you're reading this series. Secret Wars #3 is finally getting really interesting, and it's actually starting to kind of coalesce as an overall story, which I never thought it was going to do. As far as trades go, yet again, another week where no real trades came out that I'm super interested in recommending to you, but what I will do is every week that's true, I'll just recommend another trade from that came out a different week that you should be reading. So this week's recommendation is, I don't know, I'm gonna check my bookcase real quick, I'll get back to you. Okay, how about this? With Secret Wars at its height and the Ultimate Universe coming to its end, how about I recommend to you the Ultimate Universe's greatest story? And that is Jonathan Hickman's Ultimate Run. Now this is collected in 2 trade paperbacks. This one and this one. This is Jonathan Hickman before anyone really knew who he was or what he was capable of. It is really good, heart-pounding, universe-shattering stuff. And this was the book that really made me fall in love with him as a writer, so I recommend that you guys go and check out both those books. Thank you again, ladies and gentlemen, for enjoying this silly little show where I rant and just kind of scream and go into this fugue state in front of the camera. I appreciate all your support, all your views, and all those wonderful comments below. Keep talking to me down there, asking questions, giving us ideas and feedback on how we can make this show better and more digestible for you. We want to thank whoever it was out there that nominated us for a Geeky Award. It was really, really cool and very surprising for us. It definitely gave us a big uplift over here at the channel. We are just frankly really honored to be nominated and to see our names up against people who are way more successful and way more talented than we are. So whichever one of you guys put that nomination in, thanks. Thank you very much. We really, really appreciate it. And by the time this video comes out, the vote is going to be closed. So whatever, maybe we won, maybe we didn't. But it was just an honor, and it was just a lot of fun doing this show, and it's just awesome to know that other people are out there and enjoying it. I always forget to plug our Facebook page. It's another place where we have where we discuss a lot of video game and comic book news, and make sure you guys are joining onto that so you too can have conversations with some jackass in Illinois. Make sure you follow me on Twitter, and as always, make sure you subscribe to Video Game Time Machine. For every subscriber we get, I will avenge the death of your father. To both of our fans out there, make sure you come back next Sunday and every Sunday at the end of time for another episode of The Pull. Now get out of here and read comic books because they're fucking awesome.